Hi guys, Matthew here from the MMAT YouTube channel as well as Canadian Reload Radio. I'm here to do a quick video with you about how to improve the trigger on your new Savage Axis. Now let me preface this by saying that I accept zero responsibility for anything that you do to your firearm. I highly recommend that you seek out a highly qualified gunsmith for any work done to your firearm. I should also mention that this trigger job is by no means an exact science, and you will want to test the trigger and different springs and different spring lengths yourself to come up with a suitable trigger weight. So with that all in mind, let's get started. Alright, so before we get started, let's have a quick look at what the trigger pull is on this axis before we go. So this scale says that this jug of water weighs 7.4 pounds. Can you see that? Yeah, 7.4 pounds. Let's go ahead and lift that, and you'll see as we pick up the jug of water with the trigger, I just barely touch the trigger and it goes off. So we're looking at a 7.5 pound trigger pull here. First of all, we'll start with the safety check, make sure that the firearm is in fact unloaded. It is, and so we'll go ahead and take the bolt out. So to do that, you depress the trigger, and then depress the bolt release lever there, and then just pull the bolt right out, and we'll set that aside for now. Next up, we're going to remove the two action screws on the bottom. The detachable box magazine, you can just leave that in. That will not interfere with anything, so just go ahead and leave it. In fact, it helps keep the firearm stock together. Alright, now this is what I meant about the mag holding the firearm stock together. The stock is actually two pieces, so if you don't want that to fall out while you're fiddling and faddling, just leave your magazine in place, and it locks that piece in so that it doesn't fall out. So we can now just set the stock aside. So what we're left with now is the trigger components attached to the action, attached to the barrel. So we'll go ahead and take the trigger off by removing this C-clip and then pulling out this here pin. Alright, so this is what we have for trigger mechanism. This is the safety screw. This is what the slide safety engages. As you pull it back, that blocks the path of that screw, and that either allows the trigger to be pulled or not to be pulled. The spring is threaded into this hole here, and that hole is a 10/24 standard screw size. As you can see, that just screws right in. It's actually a lot like the AccuTrigger, the difference being this spring is a lot heavier and a lot stronger than the AccuTrigger. This spring is held in by this yellow goop that's holding in the safety screw as well. I cleaned that off. I used a 10/24 tap and just screwed that through and cleaned all that gunk out of there. So as you can see now, a standard 10/24 screw threads right in. So what we're going to want to do is do that, but we're going to put a drop of Loctite there so that it stays in place. Once that's in place, just set it aside to dry. What you're going to want to do now is find a spring. The spring that you find, it's not really important what kind of spring it is, except that it be very easy to manipulate. You don't want a hard, stiff spring. You want a slinky sort of type spring. You want it to be loose. Compared to the factory, you can see that this spring is quite a bit thinner and has a lot less strength than the factory spring. You're going to want to cut that to a length that you're comfortable with. It took me a bit of trial and error, but it turned out that a nice thin spring like this turned out to be about the same length as the original factory. And I have no idea where this spring came from. I just found it in my little spring box where I keep all of my spare springs, and this is the one that turned out to work the best. The spring needs to be able to fit on the screw, yet at the same time be able to fit in the hole here. So I did find another spring that looks like it probably would have worked better had it fit in this hole, but it doesn't fit in this hole, so it's not going to be appropriate for this job. So this spring won out. So let's see what we do next. So what you're going to want to do now is just take said spring that you cut to length earlier and just thread it onto the screw. If your spring is too big to thread, it's no problem. Just set it on the screw, and then we're going to attach that back to the receiver. Now, many of you may have noticed that there is some side-to-side wiggle in these axis triggers, and so a quick fix for that is to find a washer that fits the pin and just insert it in there along with the trigger whenever you put it back together. Now the trick is to find one thin enough. I couldn't, so I actually just took a brass washer and scrubbed it against some sandpaper until it was the right width. And so now the trigger is nice and tight. When reassembling, ensure that this part is underneath here. Once you have it through, simply reattach the C-clip and you're done. Now let's put it back together and see what kind of trigger pull we get. Alright, so here we are back at the digital scale, and I have found the amount of water that activates the trigger. Let's see how much it is. And would you look at that, it doesn't even register on my scale. Just let me show you that this does in fact pull the trigger. So okay, so it's just hanging, and I just barely touch the trigger and off it goes. So let's figure out another way to figure how much this weighs. Alright, so what I'm going to do is add this pail of ammunition to this scale to get the scale to actually activate, and we see that it comes to 41.6 pounds. And then we're going to add the water, then we'll reset it, we'll add the water, and it comes to 45.6. So that gives us a new trigger pull weight of 4 pounds. So not bad for about $1's worth of extra gear. So for less than $1 and less than half an hour's work, you too can improve your Savage Axis trigger to around 4 pounds. So thank you for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something, and as always, see you next time. Completely. Now let me preface this by saying that I accept zero responsibility. Stupid trucks. The difference being this spring is a lot heavier, a lot higher tensile strength. Is that the right word? No.